If you've got a mild case of analysis paralysis, adjustable shelves are cool. Can't commit on where to put a shelf? Make it a future use problem by making it adjustable. And the easiest way to make adjustable shelves is with shelf pins. There are just so many jigs and techniques for drilling a whole bunch of holes consistently for adjustable shelves. The problem is shelf pins, they're not cool. They're incredibly practical, particularly if you're using any other System 32 hardware, but they're just kind of ugly. The pins themselves aren't particularly offensive, but a whole bunch of exposed holes showing chipboard through melamine, that's pretty gross. The next step up is brass sleeves that go into holes. Brass adds a touch of class to the shelf pin, and the brass insert itself stops the wood movement issue where the shelf pin would get pinched in the wood. However, these are relatively expensive compared to normal shelf pins, and the brass inserts require a larger hole to be drilled, which then rules out most of the shelf pin jigs on the market, making it a pretty slow option. But what if you wanted an all-wood solution that takes even longer to construct? I've got the perfect system for you. I started by gluing on a paper template with spray adhesive to some 9mm scrap plywood. The roller helps push out any air bubbles and helps get a better bond. The template is then trimmed to a rough size at the table saw. The teeth are roughly cut at the bandsaw. I'm cutting close to the line, not on the line. This is just to remove the majority of the waste so the hand tool work is quicker. Using a straight scrap piece of hardwood, I line it up with the line on the template and clamp both pieces in a vise. The hardwood acts as a pairing guide so the chisel can be held flat on it and remove the waste on the plywood. This isn't a super quick process, but it leaves great finish and is super accurate. Off camera, I did a very quick test and it worked wonderfully, actually a lot better than I thought it was going to. I'm using a 1/4" flush trim bit, and it gets really quite a long way into the corners here because of the relatively shallow angle. If it was closer to 45 degrees, there'd be a fair bit still left there. To clean that up, it's just a couple of quick strokes with a chisel and I've got a very crisp corner. Alternatively, the bridge piece could be just rounded on its corner and that would work and look pretty good too. The problem with my test was that it's not easily indexable. It's fine for doing a small piece like this, but if I've got a bookshelf, I'm probably wanting a 600mm plus. I need a way to advance the template down the piece, much like you'd find with a shelf pin jig. With that in mind, I need to make some changes to my template. I can use the template itself as a sled, but it does need some holes for some bolts to go through. Then when I get my standard stock for making the actual Sawtooth shelf portion, if I cut this just a little bit wider, I can then match up those bolt holes, and once I've routed everything, I can just trim that off. I transferred the pilot holes in the template onto the baseboard by drilling through the holes. Once the template was removed, I could flip the baseboard and use a 13mm Forstner bit to drill 3mm deep. This will create a clearance space for the T-track bolt. Flipped the right way up, the pilot holes can be drilled out to their final diameter of 5/16 of an inch to match the T-track bolt diameter. With the jig built, and I am using that term very liberally here, I've got a piece of scrap that's roughly the correct thickness for what I want for the standards in my bookcase. This is about 1/2 inch 12mm, and I've drawn out where I'm going to be routing away for the Sawtooth mechanism. I'm going to cut away the majority of the waste on the bandsaw first. The reason for this is that you can do it with a flush trim bit, but the size of the bit, in this case 1/4 inch, isn't really designed to remove that much material without a lot of chipping. This is just quicker, saves a lot of cleanup, which is the whole point of using the jig in the first place. So with that routed now, I can adjust the template. The workpiece will slide down on the holder. I've made a couple of mistakes, which I'll get to in a moment. And really similarly to a shelf pin jig, I can now route the rest of these nice and smooth without having to have a really large template. I mentioned I made a mistake on this, and I actually made a couple of mistakes. First was on the template holder, I was just winging the spacing. I should have had the spacing on this line up with 1 or perhaps 2 of the Sawtooth. Instead, I've just gone for 50mm spacing or 2-inch spacing, which is incorrect. I'll have an updated template, and off camera I'll build a new sled just so that it works. Second is a lot of chip out on this, and that's because of the direction of the routing. With just a single bearing bit on this, I can't really route downhill all that easily. So ideally, you want to cut away as much material on the vertical piece, this transition here, so that you don't get a whole bunch of tear out. Alternatively, you can score it. Chisel works pretty well for getting a deep enough line that you don't get too much chip out. Hopefully on this section here, I'll get a little bit of a better result, so let's try that now. I cut the test piece in half vertically, and I've clamped it to either side of this bookcase, and I made a test bridge piece. As you can see, the bridge piece is just 2 angled cuts. I'm not going to go over that. You can use a miter saw, you can use a table saw sled, you can use a miter gauge, you could use a bandsaw or a handsaw, whatever floats your boat will work here. It just has to be pretty close to that angle so it will slide in. I did, however, round the corners on this so that it would go into any of these, not just the ones that I've chopped. And that's how you get your adjustable shelf mechanism. Put your shelf on top of the bridge piece on both sides, and then that's your shelf. You might wonder why this wouldn't fall out, and that's because there will actually be a panel in here when the bookcase is done, but this is still at the skeleton stage of it. For the actual jig, I've got updated plans that have much better spacing, particularly for the indexing mechanism. So they're available for free, link in the description below. I've changed it so that the length of each tooth is 40mm. That way it just works out better. It does mean that the angle is 18.4 degrees, but honestly the actual angle doesn't matter too much because you're flush trimming to it. So it doesn't matter if you're a hair off, and for setting the angle on the bridge piece, you can just use a magnetic angle gauge. I've used this type of shelving on my board game storage rack before, and it works out great. I'm currently in the process of building a larger board game storage unit bookcase thing, so I look forward to seeing that in a couple of weeks' time. Thanks for watching.